This week on Different Perspectives, the Middle East is on edge. Hello, I am Paul Ndiho. Israel and Iran are trading blows, airstrikes, retaliation, and now whispers of U.S. military intervention. President Donald Trump is reportedly considering targeting Iran's underground Fordo nuclear site, a move that could drag America deep into yet another war in the region. Diplomatic efforts are underway, but time is running out. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, is facing pressure like never before. Israel's defense minister says Khomeini cannot continue to exist. That's not just a rhetoric, that's a threat to the very top of Iran's leadership. Dr. Edgar Gitua, a security and diplomatic expert at Strathmore University in Nairobi, Kenya, helps us understand what's at stake and how this conflict could explode beyond the region. Welcome back to Different Perspectives.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
You are, unlike most people, you've written extensively about the Iran-Israel conflict. You actually about to publish a book about this conflict. Let's start there. Tell us what's going on in this region.
The truth of the matter is, and without leaning on any side or without being biased or holding brief for any of the countries, what the world is witnessing right now is what in international relations we call a security dilemma. A security dilemma means one country gets into a position where it feels so afraid about its security and its survival that it takes action. It takes action, preemptive action, in a way of trying to ensure its survival. So by direct interpretation, Israel has gotten to a level where it believes, and it has been convinced by history and past utterances by Iranian leaders, that Iran does not mean well for it. So Israel, having looked at Iran's development of its nuclear program, feels that Iran is not developing, its nuclear program is not for peaceful purposes, it's for the reason of creating nuclear weapons. And in 2008, 2009, there was a president in Iran called Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, and he said clearly, when we get, and that time he was talking about his missile, there was a missile called Shahab 3. He said, we are going to use our Shahab 3 missile, and when we get the bomb, we are going to wipe Israel off the map of the world. So there is that credible threat that hangs within the Iranian regime over Israel. So Israel right now, the preemptive strike by Israel was its attempt at stopping and slowing down Iran's development of nuclear weapons, because Israel knows if Iran gets nuclear weapons, they are going to be in serious problems. That is what is happening. That is the super summary of what is going on.
You bring up a very good point. There are a lot of experts like yourself who have said that this conflict goes beyond what we are currently seeing. There's been this animosity between the two countries. It goes beyond even the nuclear weapons. It's something that both states want to take each other out.
Iran and Israel have a history that spans over 2,000-3,000 years, if we so to speak. Iran is the Persian Empire. King Nebuchadnezzar, for those of you who've read the Bible, King Nebuchadnezzar, Xerxes, King Darius, that empire that took the Jews captive and held them in, kept them captive for very many years. So they've had their history, on and off. But more recently, towards the 60s and 70s, they mended relations. They were very good strategic partners. Israel and Iran were the best of friends. When the regime in Iran was different under the Shah of Iran, his name was Riza. But when the Shah was overthrown in 1979, by now this revolution led by Ayatollah Khomeini, things changed, because Ayatollah Khomeini came with his Islamic perspective of doing things. He wanted to take back the nation of Iran under strict Islamic law. And because of the problems between Israel and Palestine, automatically the Iranian regime under Ayatollah Khomeini became an enemy of Israel, and they became fundamental enemies from then on. So they have both pursued a foreign policy of containment and aggression towards each other. Remember, Iran supports non-state actors like Hamas, Hezbollah, who are always, fighting with Israel, the Houthi rebels in Yemen. So Iran has surrounded Israel with proxy actors who have always made life for Israel very difficult. So these two currently, contemporarily, are sworn enemies, but it was not always the case. There was a time they were very good friends, but regime change occurred, and now Iran at some point began declaring and pursuing its nuclear program, that has heightened tension within the state of Israel. And there is now the bad blood we see now is as a result of this, changing foreign policy and changing dynamics between the two countries.
How about people who say that both countries are pursuing a similar interests? Iran is pursuing a nuclear weapon, but a lot of people, even people, experts from the United States, have said that Israel has that nuclear weapon.
Yeah, it is true. We've experts have told us that nuclear physicists have told us that Israel is a nuclear power. Their official position is neither to deny or confirm that statement, so they will never. But remember, they are not signatories to the NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty of 1968. This treaty prohibits nation states from pursuing nuclear programs that go beyond peaceful civilian purposes. Peaceful civilian purposes means you are allowed to have nuclear power, but only for electricity generation, for medical science, for research and development, and nothing more. So there's a threshold you're not allowed to cross. And so Israel is not a member, is not bound by that treaty. So Israel got their nuclear weapons way back in the 60s, early 70s, 60s. Israel already had their nuclear weapons, but kept quiet about it and did not make it a big deal in global politics. Iran, on the other hand, you'll be surprised, it's the Americans who actually helped the Iranians with their first nuclear reactor in the 70s. So America was behind Iran's nuclear development way back in the 60s and 70s when the Shah was in power. And the aim was for peaceful purposes. The reason being, Iran was saying, we can't just rely on one source for our energy, which was the fuel, which now they have in abundance, the crude oil they have in abundance. So the idea was, why don't we diversify and get nuclear power, which was seen to be more efficient? But no sooner had the Americans brought that reactor and helped to install it, then Iran was on its way for peaceful development of nuclear power. The regime changed, and so the fear has been always from the time the regime changed, and then Iran became an enemy of the U.S. Iran became, an enemy of Israel. The problem has always been in Iran giving an honest assessment of its nuclear program. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, has time and again said that Iran is not being honest, is not allowing them to do inspections, is not being forthright with what they have done. Because as we are speaking, Paul, IAEA and other nuclear scientists say Iran is on the threshold of getting that nuclear bomb. Iran has enriched its uranium to a 70% threshold. And what you need for weapons grade is around 90%. So they are very close. In fact, they say 2 months of concerted effort, Iran will have their bomb. So when you see the scrambling right now and Israel going out there and bombing these nuclear reactors and nuclear sites, we're talking about Natanz, Isfahan, Fordo, all these areas, it is because these are the areas that have the capability to take Iran past the threshold. So people will argue differently. I will say, from my assessment, even though Israel is a nuclear power, Israel has not done anything to threaten anyone with a nuclear bomb. And I dare say, I believe Israel will not even, it is not even an option on the table right now. Israel cannot use a nuclear bomb right now on Iran, against Iran, because the consequences of a nuclear war are catastrophic. There are no winners, Paul, in a nuclear war, because nuclear weapons damage the environment. Nuclear weapons, it annihilate populations, contaminate the environment. And both the person who has used the weapon and the victims of the weapon, they are no winners in a nuclear war. Everybody loses. Humanity loses. So I feel Israel would not dare recklessly use a nuclear weapon against Iran, because that would invite consequences that are beyond comprehension.
To your point, how about the people who said that maybe these preemptive actions from Israel against Iran were premature? Not too long ago, the U.S. National Security Advisor went and made a public statement saying that from their assessment, uh, Iran was not anywhere near close to making that nuclear bomb.
Thank you, Paul. That's a very nice observation and question. Now, in the world of nuclear weapon states, all right, we have 5 official, the permanent 5 members of the Security Council: China, Russia, the US, Britain, and France. Those are declared nuclear powers. Everybody knows they have. The next people to join that group is India and Pakistan, who got their nuclear weapons in the 70s. Then Israel, not declared, but scientists say as way back 60s, 70s, they had their nuclear bomb, but kept quiet about it. And of course, now the latest proliferator, North Korea, who everybody just wants to keep off and who largely try and mind their own business. Other than those declared states that have nuclear weapons, Paul, we have another group of states called latent nuclear weapon states. These are countries that have the ability to make nuclear weapons, but have decided from a moral standpoint not to do it. We're talking about Germany, Japan, Italy. I mean, there are so many countries in Europe. They rely on their energy, nuclear energy, to make electricity. They have the know-how, the scientists. They have everything that could enable them to make nuclear weapons, but they decide not to do it because they have signed the 1968 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The problem now becomes these nuclear latent states. Iran is almost in that category. It has the know-how. It has been trying to do so for years. It has been assisted by North Korea. It has been assisted by Russia. It has been assisted by a rogue Pakistani scientist called A.Q. Khan, who really sold a lot of this technology to so many countries in the world. But the problem is the intention. Where Iran is accused of being guilty in the eyes of public opinion or global public opinion is because of not being open to the IAEA, to the body that is supposed to certify and say, we give Iran a clean bill of health. Their nuclear program is for peaceful purposes. When the IAEA inspectors go in and they are chased, not given access to certain sites, they are taken round and round in circles, and they cannot enforce or do anything. It's a voluntary process for Iran to really open up and show them, here are our reactors, this is our program, do an audit and give us a clean bill of health. So when Iran falls short of this on a number of occasions, regardless of the negotiations that you're talking about, because Iran has also been on a number of negotiations trying to, lift the sanctions over their economy, over their lives. But when Iran is not being open with its program, that is where now countries like the US, countries in Europe, countries of the world, and especially Israel, get very jittery, very unsure. And that is why you're seeing this preemptive strike. So in the world of international relations, Paul, that preemptive strike is, to many people in the world, unnecessary. But I can assure you, from the lens of neorealism and in how states behave, Israel sat down and did a cost-benefit analysis and decided the preemptive strike is the only way we can guarantee our security. So, were they right or wrong? That's a debate for another day. But right now, Israel is fighting for state survival, state security, because they feel the negotiations between Iran and the US, negotiations between Iran and anybody else, will not halt the program. The Iranians will not be open enough to sincerely stop what they are doing. And that's why we are where we are right now, with all these missiles flying and Israel commanding Iranian airspace, because Israel feels Iran is a clear and present danger to their survival and state security.
It's reported that the US is considering joining Israel in the fight against Iran. What does this mean for the entire world order?
It's going to be catastrophic. I hear you, Paul, and that is the fear we have as analysts, security analysts, because the other day I listened to one of the senior commanders and generals in Iran saying that if, for example, Israel was to escalate this and probably use a nuclear weapon, Pakistan is going to use its nuclear weapons against Israel. Now, if the US comes in, why would the US come in? The US would come in because there is a site within Iran called Fordo. Fordo, uh, the site is beneath a lot of bunkers. It is underground, well over 200, over 100 feet underground. And the only country in the world that has arsenal or bombs that can penetrate that is the US. They have their big bomb, the GBU-57, and America is the only country that carries that bomb that is able to do that. So if the US walks into this theater of conflict, it will be in the aid of Israel, and because the US is convinced that Iran is actually on the threshold of producing the weapon, that could invite a regional conflict in the Middle East. That could invite Russia and China in the Middle East into that theater of conflict. Why? Russia is Iran's biggest, trader in terms of weapons procurement. Iran buys a lot of its weapons from Russia. The S-300, S-400 missile defense systems all come from Russia. So many weapons come from Russia. So literally, Russia is a big ally of Iran. So if we have superpowers, if we have a nuclear-powered superpower like the US walking in, that could very easily tempt Russia or China to come in the aid of Iran, or even Pakistan, which is a nuclear power, which Iran has declared Pakistan are ready to use their nuclear weapons in their defense. So regionally, that we are talking about a Middle Eastern conflict of global proportions. In fact, we dare call it a mini Third World War. So it's in the interest of all nation states right now to work towards peace, for the US to soberly prevail upon Iran and Israel to de-escalate these tensions. And of course, the International Atomic Energy Agency needs to quickly go in, inspect what is going on. They already went and said that the damage Israel has caused has not created a lot of radioactive fallout, but they need to go inside to verify that what Iran is doing is peaceful, so that Israel can relax, the US can relax, all these global powers can relax. Paul, let me make a statement. Knowing the P5 and knowing these nuclear powers, they are not comfortable. None of the P5 countries, none of the countries with nuclear weapons want to see a nuclear-armed Iran. Why? The support Iran gives to Hezbollah and Hamas and other groups, militant groups globally. You do not want to give a country like Iran nuclear weapons because you are not assured that they will responsibly keep those weapons or that technology out of the hands of these non-state actors like Hezbollah and Hamas. And remember, Hezbollah and Hamas have nothing to lose. They're not nation states. They will not be taken to the ICC. These are entities that, these are militias and entities that are out there pursuing their own agenda. So the fact that Iran is friends to such entities creates a huge problem for the globe. If you ask the Russians and even the Chinese, if they were honest, they would tell you they do not want a nuclear-armed Iran. Nobody wants to see Iran with nuclear weapons.
There are people who have said that maybe the world ignored Iran's massive development of these missiles. We've seen so many ballistic missiles flying across to Israel, and they're hitting targets in Israel. There are people who said that maybe the world put so much attention on Iran's development of a nuclear weapon than focusing on the missiles, because it looks like all these missiles, ballistic long-range missiles, are being manufactured in Iran. And that's also a threat to the world order.
The security architecture in the Middle East, of course, changes a lot because of Iran's massive weapons. Iran is a major defense contractor. They manufacture their own missiles, Shahab 1, Shahab 2, Shahab 3, Fahad. They have so many. They have very accurate drones, in fact, which Russia now has been buying to use in its war in Ukraine. A lot of those drones that Russia is using against Ukraine are from Iran. So definitely you're right that the world paid so much attention on the Iran's nuclear program. Nobody Nobody saw all these missiles that were being stockpiled. But remember, there is no law, there is no international law outside there, in my view, other than the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, START 1, START 2, which the US and Russia came into to reduce their nuclear stockpiles, or the SALT 1, SALT 2, Strategic Arm Limitation Talks. Those were strategies to try and reduce the number of nuclear weapons between the US and USSR. Countries like Iran are not signatory to those kinds of treaties. And remember, for Iran, the more the better. For them, the more the better. So they concentrated, and now they have all these ballistic missiles, ICBMs, these drones, and they have, in fact, I listened to news the other day, and the Iranians were busy saying they have over 2,000 missiles. So they said they don't mind sending a few along, towards Israel, because they know they have a stockpile and a half. So nobody saw that coming, Paul. But there is no law that prohibits you from buying weapons, because you buy weapons. There are three uses for military hardware: either defense, deterrence, or offense. So Iran could easily say, we have the weapons for our defense. And right now they can claim under Article 51 of the UN Charter, we are using our weapons to defend ourselves. We are using our missiles to defend ourselves against the attacks from Israel. And they would be right under international law. So the whole point is, in terms of the ballistic missiles and stockpiles, you cannot blame any country for having them. The issue is, how are you intending to use them, and when are you using them? And Iran right now can comfortably quote and say, we are using them under Article 51 of the UN Charter that claims, gives us the right to self-defense when we have been attacked. So on that front, you cannot blame them at all. The only issue, Paul, which I'm sure now, for all of us now watching news, is the issue of collateral damage. Both attacks from Israel and Iran have the potential, and we have seen the collateral damage. These missiles, no matter how well targeted, are bringing about casualties, unintended casualties. The innocent bystanders who have just been caught in between this big war. So that is a problem now for all of us. We're looking at all these over 400 missiles that Iran has shot into Israel. Not all of them have landed on military targets. Some of them have landed on people's homes, innocent apartment blocks. We have collateral damage. Yeah, exactly. So, and even Israel has tried to be a little bit more guided and guarded. They are only targeting military sites. But remember, once again, every once in a while, we have a stray missile that ends up hitting the wrong place and we get collateral damage. For me, that is my biggest worry between this war, in that the two countries, to the best of their ability, they may try to limit their conflict to, certain areas, but they may not be able to do it 100%, and we are still getting unwanted casualties in this conflict.
Putting on your diplomatic hat, is it too late for any kind of diplomacy to prevail?
No, it's never too late, Paul. It's never too late. The calls for ceasefire, the G7 statements towards peace, and all the countries in the world that have spoken, condemned, and really talked about sobriety, it's because we have to give diplomacy a chance. Sometimes in battles, Paul, there is something we call a mutually hurting stalemate. A mutually hurting stalemate is when both countries fight to a level where they realize they are both losing. There is nothing to be gained. So they get into a stalemate where they realize continued fighting is not helping them. But usually, by the time you allow them to get to the stalemate, they have caused so much damage. The loss to human life is so high that it is not worth it. And that's why calls for diplomacy are coming from all quarters in the world. And I still believe there is a chance. Definitely, the P5, they need to take leadership in this issue, put aside their partisan views and their partisan biases, and really just the Security Council led by the P5, speaking with one voice, need to tell Iran and Israel it is time to back off. And by extension, tell the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, go into Iran and verify that nothing suspicious is taking place, so that we can all put this on the table, work out a negotiation, work out an agreement that satisfies both Iran and Israel, so that we get to a point of normalcy. Because without diplomacy, Paul, I can assure you, Israel will not stop bombing what it believes are sites where nuclear weapons are being developed. Israel will not stop. Israel will not listen to the Security Council. Israel will not listen to the United States of America, because for Israel, this is state survival. This is state security, state survival.
How do you respond to critics who say that both the countries have the right to self-defense?
I agree with them, and as a student of international law, international relations, I agree. Iran has the right to self-defense under Article 51. But now, Paul, allow me now to just digress a little bit. Let me put on my academic hat and teach you in 1 minute what international law says. Under the use of force, no country in the world is allowed to use force against any country. So the blanket, thou shalt not use force, that is cast in stone in international law. However, there are two views, there are two schools of thought that emerge. There are countries in the world, there are two schools of view. One is called the permissive school, and the other one is called the restrictive school. The permissive view are countries that argue it is okay for you to use force if you're defending yourself, or if you're, for example, what Israel has done, the preemptive strike by Israel is under the permissive view. Israel started the fight under a preemptive attack, because the preemptive view states you are allowed to attack someone if you believe they are about to attack you, or if they have a bad intention against you. Where the best defense is offense. Literally, that's what that view is trying to say. So the best way to defend yourself is to attack first. That is what Israel has done. Another reason why you're allowed to use force, Paul, is if you are rescuing your nationals abroad, like what the US and Israel do. Israelis flew to Entebbe and rescued, their people when Idi Amin, when they were hijacked by the Palestinians, and you remember the Palestinians were hijacked,
Right.
the raid
And
on Entebbe.
Netanyahu's brother was killed at Entebbe.
Exactly, yeah. Netanyahu's older brother was killed in that raid on Entebbe. So Israel was invoking the right of, I am going to use force against Uganda to rescue my people. Is it allowed under international law? It is not acceptable, but they claimed we were going to rescue our nationals instead of them dying in Uganda, and Idi Amin has refused to let them go. So they went and did it. Sometimes force is allowed when genocide is about to happen. For example, like Kosovo. You saw what NATO did, the bombing of Kosovo in 1999 because of the genocide that was taking place. So countries are allowed, for example, if Kenya or Uganda or any country is, genocide is taking place, people are being killed right, left, and center by a rogue regime, other countries can intervene militarily using force. But you see now, Paul, not all countries will agree to abide by all these rules. The restrictive view says you are not supposed to use, and many countries in the world agree not to use force, try and pursue diplomacy. But countries always do what they feel best. Countries will always act in a manner that protects their interests. So Israel, using the permissive view of the use of force in international law, decided to attack Iran, saying Iran is producing, we are unsure of Iran's intentions. They are refusing to open up for everybody to assure us that we are not in danger. So instead of waiting for danger to come, we are going to attack them first. And that is exactly what happened. And that's why we're in this conflict. So let's give diplomacy a chance. We all want to use diplomacy, but yes, people use force.
But using the same premise that you just alluded to, Iran is equally doing the same thing.
Exactly. So now, if we are looking at the strict use of international law, Iran actually looks like it's the one that is justified, because Article 51 of the UN Charter states you shall not use force unless you're defending yourself, unless you've been attacked. So Iran waited. When they were attacked, they started firing back. But now here is the catch, Paul. The same international law says, even as you defend yourself, there is a law called proportionality. Don't use more force than necessary when you're defending yourself. So Iran has already sent over 400 missiles into Israel. Has Israel sent 400 missiles into Iran? I highly doubt. So even on the laws of proportionality, there's another problem there. Someone has defended themselves with excessive force.
When is your book coming out? And you care sharing maybe a few things about your new book about this conflict between the two countries?
All right. Yeah. So my book is titled why Iran's nuclear ambition will lead to international conflict. All right. And basically, I started this journey in 2009, and I started by saying that the rate at which Iran was moving during then and the complaints that were coming from all over the world back then were going to lead the world into an international conflict. I know I took a bit of time, but I've followed it closely. I've seen the negotiations that I've gone through into this. And now this is a step in showing the escalation of, once again, that nuclear ambition. So my recommendation is, and I keep saying it, and that's what I was just presenting in today's podcast, Iran needs to open up to the International Atomic Energy Agency to prove to everyone that they have nothing to hide, to prove to everyone that they are pursuing nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. They are duty bound. They are allowed to do it if it's for peaceful purposes. Everybody's apprehension is largely due to the fact that there is uncertainty around the purpose. So the book should be out, God willing, in the next 4 months maximum. I'm at an advanced stage of just doing the final, final corrections on it. Granted, I hope by the time I'm releasing my book, things will have cooled down. If not, it will be able to help explain the journey the world has walked with Iran in trying to make Iran comply with all the right rules, what Israel has tried to do on its own to try and slow down Iran. Basically, I'll be also trying to educate people and the world. Why do nation states pursue nuclear weapons in the first place? What is so good about nuclear weapons? I'll be trying to talk about that. And I'll be trying to show what the world has tried to do to put safeguards so that all countries are prohibited from crossing the threshold to getting nuclear weapons.
Thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me this platform to explain some of these things. Thank you so much.
Dr. Edgar Gitua is a security and diplomatic expert at Strathmore University in Nairobi, Kenya. We want to know what you think about this war. Will cooler heads prevail, or we are looking at the opening act of something bigger? Share your comments in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Paul Ndiho on X, Instagram, Threads, Facebook, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, and YouTube.